I moved into this old warehouse complex last week. It had character, and I thought it would help my creativity as a graphic designer. I was excited, but I had no idea what was coming. On my first night, I heard gentle knocks on my door. I jumped. I thought a neighbor might need something. I opened the door, but there was nobody there. Just quiet. A chill ran down my back. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I imagined it, or it was the wind. But that moment stuck with me. Over the next few days, I got used to the usual sounds, the cafe below me and the city buzzing outside. But then the knocks returned. They were rhythmic and deliberate. Each time, my heart raced. Sometimes they came late at night. I would clutch my blanket waiting. Was it a prank, old wood creaking? I didn't know, but it made me uneasy. One evening, I worked late, focused on my canvas. Suddenly, I heard a soft tapping, but this time it came from inside the wall. My heart pounded. It sounded almost like fingers drumming, a pattern that sent shivers down my spine. I swallowed hard. I convinced myself it was just the pipes. But later that night, I tried to sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening for anything. That's when I heard it. A faint voice. I couldn't understand the words, but it felt like it was calling my name. I sat up, wide awake. Was I losing it? Maybe I just needed rest. The next day, I decided to talk to my neighbor. I knocked on her door. She opened it and looked at me with wide eyes. "You heard it too, didn't you?" "The knocks?" she asked. I felt a mix of relief and confusion. What did that mean? Who, or what, was making those noises? That night I stayed up late again, hoping for answers. And the knocking came back. This time it was louder. It felt impatient. I was cold. My skin prickled with fear. The taps grew frantic. I heard that voice again, echoing inside my head. I jumped out of bed. Was it more than just sounds? I rushed to the door, my heart racing wildly. I needed to know what was out there. Then, just like that, the knocking stopped. Silence wrapped around me. I stood there, breathing hard. In the quiet, I thought I saw a shadow move in my periphery. I opened the door, but again nobody was there. Only darkness. Now I can't shake the feeling that something is waiting here in this old building. Something that wants me to discover it. I'm not sure if I can stay much longer. Should I look into it and uncover whatever it is? Or should I just run away from this creeping dread? That night, sleep eluded me again. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while shadows danced in the corners of my room. Panic washed over me every time a noise echoed through the building. The cafe below me had closed for the night, and the hum of the city had quieted. All that remained was the unsettling solitude of the warehouse. I was about to drift off when the knocking began again, this time more insistent, almost demanding. I couldn't ignore it. Sitting up, fear tangled with curiosity. I needed to uncover the source. I took a deep breath and slipped out of bed. I grabbed my phone for light, its dim glow barely cutting through the darkness. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last. I reached for the handle and stopped. What if it was nothing, or worse, what if it was something? But I couldn't back down now. I had to know. When I opened the door, nothing greeted me but the still air. So I stepped out, my pulse racing. I listened carefully, trying to pinpoint the noise. The knocking came again, clearer but from somewhere farther back in the hall. With shaky breaths, I followed it, moving slowly down the corridor. As I walked, I felt a draft brush against my skin. It felt cold, unnatural. The knocking grew louder, echoing off the walls, urging me onward. I reached an intersection where two halls converged. I paused, feeling the weight of an unseen gaze. There was a door slightly ajar on my right, an old wooden door with fading paint. The knocks came again, now louder and more frantic. I was torn. I wanted to run, to shout for someone, but a strange compulsion pushed me forward. I approached the door, heart hammering in my chest. Should I peek inside? What was waiting for me? With a trembling hand, I leaned closer, trying to look through the sliver of space. That's when I saw it, a flicker of movement. I jerked back, startled. For a moment, I sensed something watching me from within the room, something cold and uninviting. Then I heard it, a whisper, clearer now. "Help me!" It sent a jolt through me. Help who? Why? The fear bubbling in my stomach was overwhelming, but the curiosity was stronger. I pushed the door gently and it creaked open wider. The interior was dark, the air heavy. A clutter of old furniture loomed, shrouded in shadows. Suddenly the knocks surged intensively, as if urging me to step inside. I hesitated, heartbeat echoing in my ears. "What do you want?" I called, my voice shaky. The room fell silent, my breath caught in my throat. But then, from the depths of the darkness, a figure emerged. It was just a silhouette, but I could make out a face. It didn't look human. Panic set in as I stumbled back. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind me. Everything went dark. I was trapped. My heart raced as I clawed at the door, desperate and terrified. I could hear it again. That faint voice, whispering my name. I was losing my grip. I needed to escape before it was too late. But from somewhere behind me, I sensed movement again. It was closing in. The darkness felt suffocating. I stumbled backward, my hands brushing against the rough wooden surface of the door. I wasn't sure if I should scream or stay quiet. The last thing I wanted was to draw attention to myself, but that eerie whisper echoed in my mind, growing louder. "Help me." I could feel my heart racing, each beat a warning. The silhouette seemed to move toward me, an unnatural grace in its floating form. I needed to think. I turned and pounded on the door, panic bubbling inside me. "Let me out, please!" But no one answered. The chilling quiet was all-consuming. I pressed my back against the door, searching for an escape. As my eyes adjusted, I saw shapes shifting in the dark room. There were more figures lingering in the shadows, their outlines grotesque and twisted. I could hardly make sense of what I was seeing, but a primal instinct told me to run. A loud crash shattered the silence. One of the objects, a broken chair, toppled over as if something had knocked it aside. I froze. The figures shifted again as if reacting to the sound. I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to find a way out. I stepped away from the door, hands trembling as I searched for anything I could use. My phone's light flickered uncertainly as I swung it around. The dim beam revealed more debris, broken glass, dusty curtains, and what looked like an old suitcase half buried under a pile of rags. Everything felt like it belonged to another time, another life. Then, I noticed a gap in the wall behind the clutter. It was small, but maybe if I could squeeze through. I took a hesitant step toward it just as something brushed against my shoulder. I whipped around, the phone's light illuminating a face. It was the same silhouette I'd seen earlier, but now it seemed clearer, more defined. A ghostly visage, with hollow eyes staring into my very soul. "Help me," it whispered again, its voice rasping like dry leaves. "Who are you?" I pressed, desperate for answers. "What do you want?" But the figure just extended its hand toward me, beckoning me closer. Pain shot through my chest, the mix of fear and empathy tying my stomach in knots. Another crash reverberated from the door. Whatever had trapped me here wasn't going to wait for my decision. I looked back at the gap, wondering if it was my only chance. But then a second figure emerged from the shadows, this one even less human than the first. It advanced with jerking movements, its mouth open in a silent scream. Determined, I broke from my paralyzed state and sprinted for the gap. I clawed at the rubble, my fingers scraping against rough edges. I could hear the whispers growing frenzied, rising like a tide as the figures swarmed closer, desperate. Just as I cramped my body into the small opening, a hand grasped my ankle. I gasped, yanking it free just as I squeezed through. Light flooded my vision as I tumbled onto the other side. I landed hard on a cold concrete floor, gasping for breath. I scrambled to my feet, turning to face the wall. It was solid, no obvious way back, but I could still hear them. Those whispers echoing, distant yet clear. I took a few steps away, hoping to regain my thoughts, but the fear melted into confusion. In that moment I realized I had escaped the room, but I didn't know where I was now. The corridor continued on, twisting and dark. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. I had to find a way out of this hell, but the real challenge loomed ahead. I needed to know what had happened to the figures that haunted me. Their stories were far from over, and I felt somehow I was destined to uncover the truth. I moved cautiously down the corridor, my footsteps echoing off the cold concrete walls. The air was stale and heavy, almost suffocating. I thought I might be in an abandoned building, but it felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. Shadows flickered and danced as my phone light wobbled, illusions of movement clawing at the corners of my vision. "Get yourself together," I muttered under my breath, trying to bolster my courage. There were still faint whispers swirling around me, rising and fading like the strings of a haunting melody. I followed the sounds, despite instinct screaming at me to run in the opposite direction. As I walked deeper, I felt something pull at my mind. It was a sense of urgency, like the walls themselves were alive, desperate for me to understand. And then I heard it, a soft noise at the far end of the hall. Knocking. It was rhythmic but slow, almost like a heartbeat. I felt my skin prickle. Was someone there? Should I call out? I took a breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The knocking stopped. The silence weighed heavily, making my heart pound louder in my ears. Just when I thought I might drown in the stillness, it started again. 3 knocks, deliberate and deliberate. I pressed my back against the wall, heart racing, weighing my options. Move closer or retreat. The impulse to uncover the source was too strong. With slow, silent steps, I crept towards the sound. The corridor twisted at odd angles like an endless loop, and I was growing disoriented. That's when I saw it, a dim light spilling from a door ajar at the end. I approached cautiously. The door looked weathered, ancient, as if it had secrets stashed behind it. The knocking came again, but this time accompanied by a soft voice. "Help! Help me!" My stomach knotted. It felt ridiculous to believe a voice was coming from behind that door, but what else could it be? I glanced around, half expecting to see a figure emerging from the shadows. "Please." It was clearer this time, tinged with desperation. Curiosity battled with fear. I reached for the door, feeling the rough texture of the wood under my fingers. The moment I pushed it open, I was hit with an overwhelming sense of dread. The room inside was filled with dust and the remnants of old furniture. It looked exactly like the room I had just escaped, yet it felt wrong. In the corner, a figure crouched, shrouded in shadows. I could just make out a pale face, eyes wide with terror. "Help me, please," it pleaded, and in that instant I froze. "Are you trapped?" I breathed, still not fully stepping inside. The figure nodded, but just then something in the room shifted. A dark shape emerged behind the figure, moving silently and deliberately. I felt ice run through my veins. My instincts kicked in and I knew I had to leave. I was in too deep, too close to something that was meant to remain hidden. Without thinking, I spun on my heel and sprinted back down the corridor, heart pounding, the whispers swirling louder as if they were angry at my refusal to engage. The soft voice of the figure faded behind me, replaced by another crash, and rather than waiting to see what it was, I ran harder, desperate to escape the weight of the darkness. But then came the whispers again, sharper now, in a language I couldn't understand. I rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. The path ahead faded into complete blackness. There was no other way to go. I turned back and then I heard it. Someone was right behind me. I didn't dare to breathe as I stood frozen. My mind raced. I could hear the quiet shuffle of footsteps coming closer, the haunting echoes filling the corridor. Whatever it was gaining on me. My instincts kicked in, and I frantically searched for a way out. I turned back toward the way I came, but the corridor looked different. The dark seemed thicker, more oppressive. It swallowed the faint light from my phone, making it feel useless. I picked a direction and ran, desperation fueling my legs. The footsteps grew louder, almost synchronized with the pounding of my heart. I felt like prey, being stalked through this maze of shadows. There was no sign of any exit, only more walls closing in on me. My breath came in short gasps. Then I remembered the door I had just come from. I needed to go back. Maybe that figure had answers. I retraced my steps. Each soft knock of my shoes felt deafening against the silence. As I approached the door, The knocking resumed, louder now, each rap sending shivers down my spine. "Help me," the voice urged from the other side again, tinged with a new edge of urgency. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Was it a trap? Or was something truly in danger? I turned the knob slowly, the creak echoing ominously. As the door swung open, I was met with an unexpected scene. The room seemed brighter, the shadows dispersing, but the figure was gone. "What?" I stepped inside, confusion clouding my mind. The space felt changed, as if it had shifted in the brief moments I had been gone. Furniture that had been still was now slightly askew. The window was wide open, allowing a sharp breeze to swirl through the room. I glanced outside and saw nothing but an endless stretch of darkness. Just then, a whisper cut through the air. "Over here." The sound was playful, but raspy, like a child's voice echoing through a ghost story. I spun around, heart leaping into my throat. Another figure stood at the far wall, partially hidden in the darkness. "Who are you?" I blurted, scanning the room for any weapons or potential escape routes. "Isn't it obvious?" The figure smiled, though something about it sent chills down my spine. "You're going to help us." "Help who?" I pressed, taking a step back. "Everyone," it replied, voice dripping with a mockery I couldn't quite place. "But first, you need to be brave." Before I could respond, the whispers returned, louder than before, wrapping around me like a thick fog. The figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows, leaving me feeling stripped of my courage. I could feel the panic clawing at the edges of my mind. Then I remembered. The knocking, the urgency. Whatever this was, it was far bigger than me. I turned back toward the door, ready to run again. But as I reached for the knob, the door slammed shut on its own, the force rattling the walls around me. Panic flooded my senses. I was trapped. My eyes darted for an escape, but the darkness seemed to churn, alive and writhing. Just then, I realized I wasn't just trapped in a room. I was trapped in this nightmare. With a pounding heart and adrenaline coursing through me, I steeled myself for whatever was coming next. I knew this was just the beginning. The room felt like it was shrinking around me. I could hear the whispers again, swirling and shifting like some twisted melody. I needed to focus. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The space was full of shadows, but I had to find a way out. In the far corner, I noticed a desk. Maybe there was something useful there. I moved towards it, careful of the creaky floor. My fingers grazed over the smooth surface, and my phone's light illuminated a stack of papers. I flipped through them, desperate for any clue. Most were illegible, but then I spotted something handwritten at the bottom of one page. "Find the key to free us." It sent a chill through me. Who was us? And what kind of key? I shoved the papers aside, searching the desk for anything tangible. There had to be a hint somewhere. I rummaged through a drawer, finding only a couple of rusted keys. I picked them up, holding them tightly. Maybe they would help. Just then, an icy gust swept through the room, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. The window was still wide open, letting in the strange darkness. Suddenly, I heard the knocking again, but this time it was frantic. Not the steady rhythm I had heard earlier. There was urgency behind it. I clenched my fist around the keys and shuffled back towards the door. "Help me!" The voice was back, louder and more desperate than before. My heart dropped. I had to know what was on the other side. With a quick twist of the knob, I tried to pull the door open. It resisted, heavy and unyielding. "Please!" The voice sounded terrified now. I could feel raw panic creeping up my spine. I turned the keys in my hand, glancing back toward the window. It felt like I was in a dream, trapped in a room that refused to let me out. In a moment of reckless bravery, or perhaps sheer stupidity, I slammed the keys against the door, hoping for a miracle. "I'm coming," I shouted. "Just hold on." The knocking stopped abruptly, plunging the room into silence, and I instantly felt a chill run through me. Had I just made things worse? Before I could think more about it, the door shook violently. The whispers returned, more anxious than before, rising and falling as if they were arguing among themselves. I felt the fear building inside me again, but I surged forward, determined. I slammed my shoulder against the door, forcing it with all my strength. As I did, a flicker of light caught my eye. It came from behind a nearby curtain. My heart skipped. I glanced toward it, hopeful. With a flick of my wrist, I tugged open the curtain. The light revealed an old, ornate keyhole embedded in the wall behind it, glinting as if it had been waiting for someone to find it. That's when I heard it again. The knocking, this time not on the door, but right behind me. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. There it was, a shadow moving in the corner of the room, closer than before. It stood still, almost watching. Then the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony. Something was coming for me, something that wanted in. I had no choice but to act quickly. In that moment of growing dread, I knew. I had to find the key to my freedom, or I wouldn't make it out alive. The shadow shifted and I felt my pulse quicken. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. It was about the size of a person, but its edges were blurred, as if it were more smoke than solid form. The whispers throbbed louder, a chaotic jingle that filled the room and pushed against my mind. I needed that keyhole. With a deep breath, I tore my eyes from the shadow and rushed back to the wall. The keyhole glimmered tantalizingly, but I couldn't focus. My heart was racing, and I could still feel its presence. I fumbled with the rusted keys, panic threatening to derail my concentration. Which key was it? I tried the first one, inserting it into the keyhole. It wouldn't turn. I cursed under my breath, my hands shaking more than before. The whispers felt like claws now, tugging at my sanity, urging me to look back. I needed to block them out. "Just stay back!" I shouted, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. The shadow shifted again, inching closer until I could see its outline clearly. It looked almost human, but nothing like anyone I had ever seen. Its face was a dark void, vacant and void of emotion. I gritted my teeth and tried another key. The second one fit, but it wouldn't budge. Beads of sweat formed on my forehead, and I glanced up at the window. The darkness seemed to crawl in, consuming all the light around it. The third key. I pulled it from my pocket, praying for a miracle. It felt different, almost warm in my hand. I inserted it into the keyhole, and something shifted in the room. The whispers reached a fever pitch, a thrumming in my ears that was nearly unbearable. "Please," I cried out, twisting the key. To my shock, it turned with a soft click. The whispers fell silent, replaced by an unsettling stillness. I held my breath, half expecting the shadow to lash out. The keyhole seemed to pulse, and I took a step back, heart racing as the wall began to shimmer. Light poured from the keyhole, illuminating the room in a dazzling white glow. I could hardly believe my eyes. But before I could process what was happening, the shadow lunged forward, an indistinct mass flying toward me. I stumbled back, colliding with the desk. The whispers shot back to life, deafening, drowning out my thoughts. I grabbed the keys tightly, bracing for impact, but just as I did, the light from the keyhole exploded outwards. It enveloped everything in the room, the desk, the floor, the shadow, me. In that moment, I felt a tugging sensation, like I was being pulled away from this place. And then everything went dark. As my vision cleared again, I found myself on the other side of the door, breathing heavily. I was outside. The air was crisp, and the whispering voices were replaced by utter silence. I had escaped, but at what cost? I turned back to the door, aware that something inside still lurked, waiting for its chance. That shadow, whatever it was, hadn't followed me, yet. Or perhaps it was still watching from the dark. I knew I hadn't escaped danger. I had merely relocated it. And then it hit me. What if finding the key had been just the start? What if there was more to this than I realized? That's when I heard a soft knocking again. It was coming from behind me, different this time. Not frantic but steady. It chilled me to the bone. I took a step back, my heart pounding as I wondered who, or what, was on the other side now. I stood frozen, staring at the door. The knocking continued, rhythmic and deliberate. I considered running, but my feet felt glued to the ground. "Hello," I finally called out, my voice barely carrying over the sound of my own heartbeat. No answer. Just the steady knock, knock, knock. Whoever or whatever was on the other side had to be aware that I was here. I glanced around, scanning my surroundings for anything I could use as a weapon. A branch lay on the ground nearby. It wasn't much, but it felt better than standing here defenseless. I snapped it up and gripped it tightly, my knuckles turning white. The knocking stopped suddenly, replaced by an eerie quiet. I held my breath, listening for any sounds, but there was nothing. The silence felt heavier, as if it pressed down on me. After what felt like an eternity, I took a tentative step forward. The door was solid and unyielding, but I could see a faint light glowing through the cracks. Then, without warning, the door shook. Someone was pushing against it from the other side. I stumbled back, heart racing again. I had to get out of here, but where? The only way was to face whatever was behind that door. I glanced back at the woods, dark and foreboding, but I could feel the weight of the door calling me. The knocking resumed, louder and more forceful this time. I raised the branch, a poor defense plan, and took a deep breath. "Who's there?" I shouted, hoping for a logical response. My voice trembled with fear. Silence once more followed, but then I heard a soft whispering, just low enough that I couldn't make out the words. Was it still the shadow? My mind raced with possibilities. Was someone trapped inside? I had to know. I approached the door again, bracing myself. The whispers turned into chaotic murmurs, blending together in an unsettling symphony. I pressed my ear against the wood, attempting to catch a single word, a single clue. Suddenly the door rattled again, and I recoiled, nearly dropping my makeshift weapon. "Stay back!" I yelled. A moment passed before the knocking returned. But this time there was something else. Laughter, an unsettling high-pitched sound that sent chills down my spine. I knew I should run, but something pulled me closer. Curiosity battled with fear. I couldn't just leave. I needed to figure out what was happening. The laughter dissolved into more whispering, and the atmosphere crackled with tension. The door creaked slightly, almost as if it were beckoning me to enter. That's when I saw it. A strange shimmer around the edges of the door, a faint light trying to escape. My hand reached for the handle, frozen with indecision. Then it hit me like a slap. If I opened this door, would I be stepping back into danger? Or would I finally uncover whatever truth lay behind the shadows? Before I could voice my fears, the whispers intensified, drawing me in. I steadied my hand on the handle, my heart racing beyond reason. The stakes had never felt higher. And then I turned the knob. As soon as I turned the knob, the door swung open with a heavy creak, revealing a dimly lit room beyond. Dust hung in the air, swirling around like tiny ghosts. I hesitated at the threshold, peering inside. The whispers escalated into a low hum, more chaotic than ever. I stepped over the threshold, branch in hand, scanning the room. It felt like a time capsule, faded wallpaper peeling off the walls and furniture shrouded in white sheets. A thin layer of dust covered everything, making it clear that no one had entered this space in years, maybe decades. Yet those voices persisted, echoing in my mind, urging me forward. "Hello," I called into the darkness, trying to summon any remaining courage. The only response was the soft flutter of something behind me. Instinctively, I turned quickly. The door slammed shut behind me, locking with a dull thud. Panic surged through my veins. "Okay," I whispered to myself, taking another cautious step inside. I could see a few outlines of objects, an old armchair, a table covered in torn papers, and something else in the far corner. The whispers grew quieter, replaced by the sound of my own breathing and the faint creaks of settling wood. The corner held a small, ornate mirror, its surface tarnished but still reflecting a distorted version of the room. I took a deep breath and approached it. As I got closer, the air felt charged, almost electric. I could see faint shadows drifting behind me in the reflection, even though I was alone. I quickly glanced over my shoulder, but nothing was there. "What is happening?" I murmured, trying to gather my thoughts. My fingers grazed the edge of the mirror. It felt cold to the touch. Just then, I noticed something scrawled into the frame, a series of words carved in a hurried script. "Stay away from the door." My heart raced again. Who had been here, and why? Before I could think further, a loud crash reverberated from behind me. I spun around, clutching my branch. The sound came from the door I'd just entered through, splintering as if something was trying to get in. The whispers transformed into panicked cries, and it felt as if a storm was brewing within these four walls. My heart pounded in rhythm with the chaos, and I knew I had to act. The mirror felt important, almost significant. I couldn't just ignore it. As I looked back, the shadows in the reflection began to form into wispy figures. They hovered closer to the surface, and I felt the urge to reach out. But then, just as quickly, a voice cut through the noise, loud and clear. "Get out now!" It was desperate, filled with urgency, and I could feel my time was running out. Terror gripped me. I turned to flee, but the door was no longer there. Instead, there was just a wall. My stomach dropped. I was trapped. Behind me, the shadows were no longer mere wisps. They solidified, their features twisted but unmistakable. Whatever had been knocking was now inside the room with me. I took a deep breath, my back pressed against the wall. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking under pressure. That's when the shadows began to step forward, and everything went black. I woke to the sound of my own ragged breathing and the faintest sliver of light cutting through the darkness. Confusion enveloped me, and I quickly pushed myself up, trying to orient myself. I was sitting on a cold concrete floor in a narrow corridor. The eerie whispers that had surrounded me moments before were absent, replaced by the distant hum of life beyond the wall. I looked around, wrestling with the bittersweet fantasy that the chaos might simply disappear with each blink. Could it be over? Had I truly escaped? I braced myself, my instincts still wired for danger. Tentatively, I rose to my feet and brushed off the dust from my clothes. The corridor stretched out, empty and silent. I could see another door at the far end, slightly ajar. With my heart pounding in my chest, I made my way toward it, every shadow casting unease in my mind. A split second before I reached for the knob, a shiver ran through me. What would I find? The terrifying figures could still be lurking, waiting to drag me back into their nightmarish realm. Nevertheless, I pushed down my fear and pulled the door open. The space beyond was a small, brightly lit room that appeared to be part of the warehouse I had first entered. My breath caught as reality twisted around me. Muffled voices rose from a crowd of people gathered near the entrance of what looked like a bustling cafe, a stark contrast to the eerie silence of the corridors I had just traversed. Each face looked normal, yet I couldn't shake the sensation that something was still very wrong. As I stepped fully inside, I winced. Relief washed over me, but uncertainty lingered. Had I truly escaped, or was I experiencing some form of detachment from reality? I searched the crowd for familiar faces, but there was no one I recognized. The people sat at tables and held conversations, their laughter dissolving into the air. I stood there, absorbing momentary comfort, but a creeping dread wormed its way back into my chest. I hadn't yet faced the truth behind those shadows, or the haunting whispers. A glimpse of movement caught my eye, a flicker in the periphery. I turned, but all I saw was a flickering light from a neon sign in the window. Was I imagining things? I shook my head to clear the fog, but even amidst the normalcy, I could feel the weight of the shadows pressing down on me, threatening to consume me again. Outside, the city went on, and life continued, yet a chill crept over me, leaving me standing still. I still could hear faint knocks echoing in my mind, the rhythm heavy, persistent. It haunted me, reminding me of everything I'd witnessed. Suddenly, I noticed a figure emerging near the back of the cafe. It looked familiar, yet dread laced every inch of it. My heart raced in recognition, yet stood still in terror. Was this another manifestation of what I had escaped? The figure smiled, lips curled in a knowing way that sent my pulse racing. It was a face that reflected something I couldn't place, hovering at the boundary between recognition and dread. With tears swelling in my eyes, I turned to flee. Bursting through the cafe door, I stumbled outside, breathless. As I moved, I could still feel those phantom whispers echoing, swirling around me like a dark wind. They beckoned me back, taunted me with questions that would likely remain unanswered. Would I be free of the memories? Would I ever know the truth behind those shadows in the warehouse? The lingering unease shifted my reality, and I realized the confrontation I had narrowly escaped would always shadow my existence. I walked away from the warehouse, the city buzzing around me, but as I took every step, I knew I would never fully let go of what I had encountered. I glanced back, a hollow knot forming in my stomach. I might have left the darkness behind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still there, waiting just out of sight. Sometimes late at night, in the silence of my thoughts, I hear whispers calling my name, reminding me that the boundary between the ordinary and the unknown is thinner than we realize. And I wonder, just wonder, if maybe those shadows are still watching me,